Good afternoon, everyone. I call to order the regularly scheduled Ways and Means Committee, and the first one for the year. And I have with me on the dais council members Cunningham, Johnson, Fletcher, Nene Palmisano, Vice President Jenkins, and we have a quorum of the committee and therefore can dispense with our business today. And I will start with the consent items. We have around 46 consent items, and they are as follows. Item number 1 is a litigation matter of Keith Daniel versus City of Minneapolis. Item number 2 is a legal settlement, Martin versus City of Minneapolis et al. Item number 3 is a legal settlement, Rochelle Levine versus City of Minneapolis. Item number 4 is a legal settlement, Glenda F. Johnson versus Jason Wolf. Item number 5 is a legal settlement, Viet and Company, Inc. versus City of Minneapolis. Item number 6 is a legal settlement, workers' compensation claim of Michael Gosiner. Item number 7 is a legal settlement, workers' compensation claim of William Dodgson. Item number 8 is a contract amendment with Meet Minneapolis for sales and marketing for the Minneapolis Convention Center and convention and tourism services for the city. Item number 9 is annual property insurance premium for the Minneapolis Convention Center, Talmadega building and parking deck. Item number 10 is a rebid for site improvements at public service building. Item number 11 is a contract amendment with RTL Construction, Inc. for increased drywall work for public service building project. Item number 12 is a contract amendment with Grazzini Brothers and Company for tile and stone work for the public service building project. Item number 13 is a contract amendment with Modern Piping, Inc. for mechanical work for the public service building project. Item number 14 is a contract amendment with Questions and Solutions Engineering, Inc. for consulting services for the public service building project. Item number 15 is a contract amendment with Prindle Painting, Inc. for painting work for public service building project. Item number 16 is a contract amendment with Empire House, Inc. for interior glazing work for the public service building project. Item number 17 is a contract amendment with Danny's Construction Company, LLC, for structural steel work for the public service building project. Item number 18 is a contract amendment with Distinctive Cabinet Design, Inc. for casework and millwork for the public service building project. Item number 19 is a contract amendment with B&D Associates, LLC, for masonry work for the public service building project. Item number 20 is a contract amendment with Premier Electrical Corporation for electrical work for public service building project. Item number 21 is a contract amendment with Kevitt Companies for shoring and exterior planters for public service building project. Item number 22 is a contract amendment with M.A. Mortensen Company for increased carpentry casework for the public service building project. Item number 23 is a contract amendment with Lejeune Steel Company for structural steel supply for the public service building project. Item number 24 is a contract with DRI Consulting and SKS Consulting for management assessments and related services. Item number 25 is a contract amendment with Infor Public Sector, Inc. for license, maintenance, and support of enterprise land management system. Item number 26 is a contract amendment with Evolve Software Corporation for Project Docs upgrade. Item number 27 is a contract amendment with Deloitte Consulting LLP for pension benefit consulting services. Item number 28 is a contract amendment with Minneapolis Telecommunications Network for community public access television. Item number 29 is a bid for telecommunications equipment. Item number 30 is a contract with Employment Investigations, Inc. and J. Selma Law, PA for neutral workplace investigations. Item number 31 is a Fair Housing Implementation Council Cooperative Funding Agreement Amendment. Item number 32 is a Minnesota Housing Community Home Ownership Impact Fund grants for the development of new construction homes and home improvement loans. Item number 33 is a Minnesota Department of Human Services grant for targeted opioid treatment, prevention, and recovery services. Item number 34 is a Minnesota Department of Health Public Health Service grant. Item number 35 is a contract amendment with the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension for DNA analysis of police department case evidence. Item number 36 is a contract with Hennepin County for waste disposal services. Item number 37 is a contract amendment with Shank Constructors, Inc. for Columbia Heights Filter Plant Ferric Chloride System Improvement Project. Item number 38 is a contract amendment with Lionel Lakes Landscaping, Inc. for turf establishment. Item number 39 is a contract amendment with Maya Contracting, Inc. for North Loop reconstruction project. Item number 40 is a contract amendment with Park Construction Company for the Hennepin Avenue South, west of Lake Street to 36th Street West street reconstruction project. Item number 41 is a contract amendment with Rice Lake Construction Group for Fridley Water Plant Rehabilitation Project. Item number 42 is a contract amendment with Tiller Corporation for bituminous mixtures. Item number 43 is an agreement with Minnesota Department of Transportation for Hennepin Avenue Street Reconstruction Project. Item number 44 is a gift acceptance from the Minnesota Department of Transportation of a parklet structure. Item number 45 is a bid for sidewalk, curb, and driveway approaches project. And the final item, 46, is a bid for hauling and disposal of dirt and snow. And I move approval of all 46 consent items. Is there any discussions or comments from my colleagues? Okay. All right, seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against, the ayes have it, and all those items have been approved. Thank you very much. And we have two more items, item 47 and item 48, for discussion. And item 47 is a contracts with Wells Fargo, N.A., U.S. Bank, N.A., Wells Fargo Institutional Retirement and Trust, and associated bank net spend for banking services. And I have our interim city coordinator, Mr. Mark Ruff, here to do the presentation. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Mark Ruff. We have before you separate actions, but the presentation will focus on the variety of banking services for consideration of the council pursuant to a request for proposals that was authorized by the council earlier in 2019. We undertake these RFPs anywhere from every 3 to 5 years, so it has been 5 years since we've revisited this. If you remember, later in 2019, we also had a request for proposals for our investment services, and the committee separately made recommendations, and the council ultimately awarded a variety of contracts related to investments. These banking services are what I would call is much more transactional, and generally the lower end cost of our banking services. So I'm going to walk through each of those services just to remind the committee which are for consideration today. The first is related to what I would call the city's checking account. It's taking in money and sending money out for either paying our employees or paying our vendors. There's very little money that sits overnight in those accounts, so these are not a combination of a savings account and a checking account. For the most part, it's just the flow of money and flow of the money out. For cities of our size, and even for smaller cities, there's a state law that requires anybody that we do business with to provide collateral, so that in any one day we may receive, for example, a $100 million property tax settlement from Hennepin County. And so if we leave that in the account overnight, state law requires us to get collateral from that bank, meaning that if that bank for whatever reason went out of business overnight, that our money would be safe because there's only federal insurance, up to a much lower level than $100 million to protect our money. So the state is very interested in protecting large cities and small cities. And so by its nature then, that kind of transactional work requires a bank that has easy access to short-term capital and security, and then also has the corporate commitment to working with the public sector because of those state law requirements. We also have bank lockbox, which is basically taking in our checks primarily and processing them for us. This is primarily through utility billing, but a variety of ways that we receive checks, and we still get an awful lot of checks as a city. Merchant accounts is the credit card processing for the city. Remembering that within the last year and a half, the city did split out our parking fund credit card processing, and so that had previously been a part of this RFP is now separate and run outside of this RFP. But again, credit card processing has federal regulations about security, about people's credit card data, and so does require a high level of corporate commitment to security. Custodial services is the entity that holds our investments in name only. So we know that people don't, for example, if you buy if you buy a municipal bond today, you don't physically get that bond anymore. You hold it in paper only, and the title holder of that is a separate company. That's true if you're a private individual or a public entity. So this custodial services is administering, are anywhere from $500 to $800 million of publicly traded investments. And then the last service, which I think in some ways is one of the most important and biggest changes out of this, is our prepaid cards. This is our ability to pay people who work for us, whether they be an election judge or a summer intern, without having to issue a check, and for them to have to use, they don't have a bank account or an ID, some complicated, less than efficient means of cashing that check in order to receive the payment from the city. So those are the services that are in front of us. We did intentionally, as a part of the RFP, to encourage as much participation from a variety of banks as possible. We did not bundle any of these services. In other words, any entity could bid on just one of these services and be considered equally, or they could bid on all 5 of the services if they wanted to. The proposals we did receive were less robust than the investment services RFPs that I described before, where in some cases we had more than a dozen. Here we did receive anywhere from 2 to 5 proposals for each of these services. For consideration of the evaluation of each of these, we had separate staff committees for each of the 5 services. And these were cross-departmental. In some cases, the park board participated as well, because we do handle some of the park board financial transactions. And each of those subcommittees totaled 35 individuals for over 20 departments. Those subcommittees made essentially blind recommendations up to an evaluation committee, of which we did have membership of the mayor's staff, this committee's chair and vice chair staff, as well as finance and coordinator staff as well represented. The evaluation criteria did include the city's existing responsible banking ordinance, as well as the scope of services, the cost of services, and then just capacity. So the recommendations from this committee to the council include a continuation of our existing contract with Wells Fargo, a continuation of our existing contract with U.S. Bank / Elevon, and then also a continuation of our custodial services with Wells Fargo, who we understand is selling their custodial services to the principal group, and so that is an understanding that that transaction is underway. And then the last being the prepaid card services to Associated Bank, who is working in collaboration with NetSpend. We did, as a committee, actually spend the most time talking about the last prepaid card proposal because of the sensitivity of fees that are implicit in any prepaid card. There are some prepaid cards that expire. There are some that if you don't use within a certain time, there's restrictions. There's some that you have only certain places where you can redeem the prepaid cards for the full amount. And so the committee and the staff from finance working on this went back at least twice after meetings with this central committee and asked questions, and came up at the end of the day with what we think is the best recommendation. These contracts, all of them are 3-year contracts with the option for extension of 2 years. We've also had additional conversations with Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo has reached out through this RFP process and voluntarily offered more services, and we had a conversation and then have a commitment in writing from Wells Fargo for what those additional services without additional compensation would be. And this is based on some feedback with conversations of members of this committee as well, which is, we think that a banking relationship should be more than just transactional, is that we should try to leverage our relationships with all of our partners the best that we can, so that we can help the city achieve larger goals. And some of those larger goals in our minds and in our reality of daily life is increasing our diverse spend and building capacity of those businesses who work with us as the city to be able to access, for example, insurance and short-term loans that are not exorbitant rates, and kind of a collective understanding of what the not just banking but also nonprofit services are that are available to help them build the capacity to meet our requirements as a city. The other is the city council has been moving towards, certainly with inclusionary zoning, mixed income housing that may not be true within the affordable housing classic sense of financing. And what can we do with our banking relationship to encourage a different way of financing a property, for example, that may have 8% affordable housing rather than 40% affordable housing, which are different financing models. Third is, how can we as a city improve our lending programs, the 2% lending program? We recently approved a grant with Living Cities and focusing more on loans within North Minneapolis. And Wells Fargo has voluntarily committed to work with us and committed a number of meetings and hours towards each of those endeavors. They have also committed to go above and beyond what is our responsible banking ordinance reporting, which is to report specifically on the amount of corporate giving for nonprofits and report specifically on their efforts in terms of their own workforce and diversity within their workforce. So these are not conditions. They are, as I said, voluntary activities that we think, when I think back 20, 30 years ago, what did we look at our local banks to help us do? It's more than just transact. It's also to build a better community. We certainly have representatives of Wells Fargo here who can answer specific questions about what that might mean. But we as a staff, I think, feel good about the fact that we've asked our vendors to go and do everything they can to support city council goals, and that will be a part of not necessarily the contract, but a memorandum of understanding, a document in writing between the city and Wells Fargo in particular. I also just lastly want to highlight that was in the RCA for those people that are watching, what the scale of compensation is for these services, because sometimes I think we believe that these are very high compensation amounts. And again, it would depend on your perspective, but from a contracting standpoint, these are kind of middle to lower middle-sized contracts. So specifically for the banking contract, in other words, our checking account, it's $135,000 annually with Wells Fargo. And for the lockbox services, it's $130,000 annually. For U.S. Bank, Elevon, it's $35,000 annually for credit card processing. For the custodial services, it is $29,000 annually. And then for the prepaid cards, it's a total of $35,000. So again, significant in the sense of the amount of transactions that go on, but relatively small in the sense of the annual city budget that is devoted to these services. So with that, certainly would recommend to the council that move approval, and I would also say that we will, as staff, for each of our partners, not just focusing on Wells Fargo, but certainly Associated, the Principal Group, U.S. Bank, continue to closely monitor the progress they are all making in terms of a commitment we're asking them to community goals. And if we don't feel there's good progress, or if you as council don't feel there's good progress, then we have the opportunity, literally in 2 years, to issue a new request for proposals, and in 3 years have a new provider for any one of these 5 services. So with that, Vice Chair, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Ruff, for that presentation. I think there's a question from Council Vice President Jenkins.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate the fact that Wells Fargo is really volunteering to step up and help us with meeting some of the city's goals, particularly around mixed income housing. I just had a couple of questions concerning the custodial services. I'm not sure if I understand exactly what that is. If you can give us a little descriptor of what that means.
Yeah. For let's say Vice Chair Fletcher, Council Vice President Jenkins, let's say in my own personal retirement account that I maybe have set aside some money, I don't own a stock certificate that sits in my safety deposit box anymore, like I may have 40 years ago if I have that. There is an entity that holds that on my behalf and kind of a fiduciary responsibility, and then I give some authority to essentially have that transfer happen electronically, so I don't have to physically mail in a stock certificate anymore, and then, or sign a piece of paper before that can occur. Okay, so a custodian does the same thing for us, just multiplied times, a million times, right? Mm-hmm. So that they handle. So when we have one of our brokers then who wants to buy and sell, that transaction is all done electronically through a custodial account. And custodial is in the sense that they are on our behalf, so they're a custodian of our funds, but it is done universally across any entity. There's nothing unique about that relationship for the city of Minneapolis versus any other nonprofit or for-profit business around.
Thank you. And then I'm just curious, I read an article this morning about Wells Fargo bleeding 50% of their fourth quarter earnings. And how does that impact their ability or the state's concern about being able to cover these amounts? I'm pretty sure they have that insurance, but maybe if someone from Wells Fargo can speak to that issue.
And maybe more specifically, Council Vice President, in terms of the article, I didn't read it, so maybe you can help me a little bit more about what the content was of the article.
That based on, I'm not sure, public perception around some of the challenges that Wells Fargo has been having over the years, and very recently, that their fourth quarter projection earnings were down 50%.
Thank you very much for the question, Councilmember Jenkins. We are a very strong bank. There was other incidences that impacted our earnings. One was a litigation of, I think, $1.4 billion that we set aside for settlements that we'll be having going forward. But otherwise, I think our earnings were very strong. I think we're very positive. We're moving in a positive direction. We feel like we are going to be getting through this very soon.
And can you introduce yourself, please?
My name is David Weesey. I'm a community development manager for Wells Fargo.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weesey. Can you talk about some of the things that the bank is doing to address some of the challenges that have been experiencing in the past?
So we recently hired Charlie Scharf to be our new CEO, and he's taken the bank in a new direction. He's looking at all of the costs that Wells Fargo has. He's looking at the products and services Wells Fargo has to try and make sure that we're balanced in a way that will lead to profit and growth going forward. Looking especially at our the costs of running such a large organization.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Council Vice President Jenkins. And we have a question from Councilmember Fletcher.
Thank you, Chair. Not so much a question as just a note of thanks. I think the process of splitting this up into chunks that people can apply for, making this more accessible so that we could consider more players. It's obviously something that we've been interested in, making sure that we're being fair to everybody. I think you've made some good choices here, and I appreciate that we've gone as far as we can, given that we're a large institution with a lot of regulation, so not everybody can serve us, and we can't just necessarily go to the credit union down the street. We have to really think about who's got the capacity to do this work. I also do want to acknowledge how significant it is that Wells is offering the additions that they offered to the services that we requested. We really do we run up against limits as a city on the ways that we can address past structural inequities. We know the ways that the city's participated in that. We know that there are things that we need to do to make right inequity that we've created in the past. And we know that when we often run up to the barrier of the ways that other institutions have participated in that and kind of need to do their part. And certainly we just got a presentation on the 2% loans that really showed us that one of the limitations of our economic development activity is our ability to leverage private funding that is often restricted in a historically racist system of credit and lending. And so the opportunity, I think, to really look at that 2% loan to help more business owners of color access private capital so that we are able to leverage more for the businesses that we're trying to support here locally, I think is very, very important. And definitely we've heard feedback from developers who have said, we'd love to build this mixed income housing, but we can't get financing for it. And so making sure that we're finding the finance tools so that the people who want to build the housing that we want to see built in our city are able to get the money behind it is very, very important. So I appreciate at least the gesture towards addressing those issues and look forward to working with everybody on that in the future. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Councilmember Fletcher. Any other questions or discussion from my colleagues? Seeing none, I'll move approval of the revised RCA, which has been distributed to all committee members, decreasing the dollar amount in Part 3 from $221,000 to $29,000 and deleting the word annually in Part 4. All those in approval say aye. Aye. Those against? The ayes have it, and that item has been approved. Thank you very much. Now we have a walk-on item, item number 48. This is a small and underutilized business contracting and minority and female workforce participation for the public service building. We'll be receiving and filing a presentation of the current status of the city goals for small and underutilized business contracting and minority and female workforce participation to date for the public service building. And we have Greg Goki to give us that presentation. Go ahead, Greg.
A little trouble getting this on the slideshow. If somebody could help me.
Take your time.
Okay, thanks. Good afternoon, Chairman Morsami, committee members. I'm Greg Oakey with Finance and Property Services. My goal today is to update you on the small and underutilized business participation, as well as the minority and women's workforce participation on the public service building project. I'm also joined by Velma Corbel from the Civil Rights Department, staff from Mortensen and CPMI, who all have roles in ensuring our city goals are met on this project. Today I'll cover these topics at a summary level and answer any questions you may have. With fast-track design and nearly 40 prime contractors and professional service contractors, we have a large number of contract amendments compared to our traditional design, bid, and build process for new facilities. Many of the contract amendments are the result of design completion, coordination, as well as correction, and multiple contracts that may be involved on a single change in scope of work. The summary here is of the 25 prime construction contracts that were bid and contracted over the last 18 months. The dollar amounts are for all contract amendments. To date, the contract amendments that you approved earlier in the meeting, and any pending pricing or future amendments that may be coming in the near future. So we have a total contracted estimate right now for construction of $131,948,400. Early in the project, working with Velma and her staff, we did establish a 25% combined minority and women business participation on the project. Rather than just having that as an overall goal for every scope of work and every bid, we did leverage Mortensen's market expertise on these large-scale projects to create goals for each prime contract. Some of these have goals as high as 35%, while other goals are significantly below 25%, as these market segments have limited MNUCP contractors to subcontract with. Currently, you have a combination of contractors not meeting goals but not exceeding goals, and some that are exceeding their contract requirements. The combination is currently projected to meet the overall goal of 25% of the projected value, with over $33 million going to women and minority-owned businesses. Also, with the city bidding separate scopes of work, we've been able to contract with 3 MNUCP firms as prime contractors, and that totaled $2.9 million. We have 13 professional service contracts that support our efforts, the 2 largest being the architect and engineering services, and as well as the construction manager's advisor contract that includes ancillary work on the site. Participation projected for professional services is 6.8% of the total of for a total of $2.2 million. We have 2 MNUCP firms as prime professional service contractors totaling $759,000. Our requirement for on-site workforce specifies 32% minority and 20% women participation. Civil rights also tracks veteran and apprentice labor for the project. As indicated, minority labor is meeting requirements while female participation is not. Contractors are expected to continue working with our civil rights staff to recruit and employ qualified female construction workers for the project. We are still currently planned on moving into the building late fall of this year and finishing about this time next year as we move the police department into the building. Over the course of 2020, we will be procuring and installing fiber, network switches, telephones, and cabling to complete our IT AV infrastructure for the building. A major component of that will be issuing a request for proposals for the cellular distributed antenna system that will ensure adequate cellular smartphone coverage for staff and public in the building. We will also be contracting for ancillary furniture that we intend to provide opportunities through the city's target market program. With that, I will answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Director Goki. Any questions? Councilmember Cunningham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for this information. Would it be possible to, I don't know if it's possible, but to get the information disaggregated, because I know that women of color are included in the numbers for minority. Is it possible to disaggregate that between those two?
I'm going to ask Velma Corbel of our Civil Rights Department to answer that question, please.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Councilmember Cunningham. My name is Velma Corbel. I'm the director in the Department of Civil Rights. And your question is about disaggregating the data for workforce or for business. Which one exactly?
Either, to be honest. I'm just curious because I feel like women of color tend to get erased in the numbers, because when we talk about women, that does not include women of color. So that's more where my question is coming from.
I think we can take a look at that. I don't know how much how granular we can get, especially with the businesses, because I think we've talked about this in the past. The way the small businesses are certified in the city, the certification methodology that we use is certifying women as a group, and we're typically talking about white women, and certifying businesses owned by people of color, of which women of color are included in those groups. So when we set the goals on projects, we're also tracking that the same way. So when we start to try to parse those numbers, it becomes a little bit more complicated to do that. The other thing that is concerning to me when we start to do that, the sample size of women who are businesses that can do construction work or women-owned businesses that can do the type of architectural and engineering work that we are asking for on a project like this, the sample size or the group size becomes so small that it also degrades our ability to be effective. Now, when we come back and talk to members of this committee, committee of the whole, I think we're coming to talk tomorrow about our supplier diversity numbers. We can dig a little bit deeper into that, because when we're talking about professional services, there are a lot more women of color who are involved in that kind of work. But when we start to parse it that way for construction and construction services, there just are not that many businesses to be able to get that granular. But when we look at where we have discretion in our other professional services, we can start to look at some of that a little bit differently.
Great. Thank you so much for the additional information.
Thank you, Director Corbell. Any other questions on this? Thank you, Mr. Goki, for your presentation. And I'm going to receive and file the following presentation. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those against? The ayes have it, and that also has been approved. And since we have no other items on our agenda, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.